I'm Allison Kaplan. I'm the editor-in-chief of Twin Cities Business Magazine. On behalf of everyone at the magazine, thank you for spending your lunch hour with us today. Everyone other than our panelists will be on mute, so go ahead, bite into your lunch, and listen to our experts share some insights and perspective on something many of us are thinking about right now: work. It has changed so much in just the last few weeks. How do we make sense of it? How do we make the most of it? And what will it look like going forward? That's what we're here to talk about. Let me introduce you to our expert panelists. We're so delighted to have them with us today. First of all, Nate Garvis. He's the co-founder of Studio E, which provides exploratory leadership programs for leaders and organizations in just about every sector: business, healthcare, arts, government, nonprofits, startups to Fortune 500s. Nate's expertise in healthcare and academia and philanthropy, combined with his rich experience in business and government, including 18 years with Target, make him a trusted advisor to many business leaders, particularly right now. Tom Hoffman is a senior vice president with Colliers International in Minneapolis and St. Paul. He brings with him nearly 20 years of real estate experience. Tom and his team specialize in identifying and constructing optimal tenant-focused solutions for a wide range of both office and industrial clients. And as the pandemic continues to push us all in new and unexpected ways, Tommy has recently become a novice chicken farmer. Thank you, Tom. Jody Thompson, last but certainly not least, is founding principal of Culture RX. She's co-authored 2 best-selling books on the modern workplace, including Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It. Jody spent 6 years as a change implementation manager for Best Buy, helping the company move to a flexible workforce. For the past 14 years, she's been personally facilitating change management communications and training processes in organizations across industries, including retail, manufacturing, professional services, and education. Her focus is always on productivity, employee engagement, client satisfaction, and the ability to attract the best talent. And that's the perfect segue into our discussion. Thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, Allie.
Thank you.
So Zoom was not created for the pandemic, although many people might be new to it, but technology has allowed us to work remotely for quite a while now. Why do you think so many companies were so unprepared or surprised by the challenge of working remotely? Jody, let's start with you.
Thank you. And it's great to be here. And this is such a great topic to talk about today, Allie. The problem right now is that the office is still considered the default location to do work. That's why we're unprepared. And we think the best place to collaborate and form spontaneous ideas is where? The office. And we're setting up workplaces, and we always have to reinforce those old ideas of where work needs to happen. So we dole out permission to people to work from home, and managers become permission granters. And we're stuck in this sort of status quo, and we just got seriously disrupted. Now we're reluctantly allowing everybody to work from home, but nothing's really changed in our mindset. And I think the worst thing I'm seeing right now in terms of technology is that managers are actually looking for spyware, right? They're looking for, how can I monitor my workers more closely than I did before? And it's interesting because people always say, well, if my people are working outside the office, how do I know if they're working? And my answer to that is, well, how do you know now? How do you know now? We have to focus on results, not where people are working from.
Okay, focus on results. Nate, what do you think about this change and how it's caught companies off guard?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Jody just said. I think that it's actually a question about the future of productivity. You know, so there are times where space really where our space really matters. We lose a lot of information. We're not present with one another, you know, body language, intonations, and the such. But where I really start to agree with Jody is that there's like the exploration side of work, where we're trying to get clarity, alignment, where all that great information matters. But then we park ourselves in a space when we're in task mode. And that's really a waste of space in a lot of ways. In fact, we see it as people sit at their cubes with headphones on and the such, right? So I think what Jody's touching upon is true. I'm not giving up on space. Again, you know, I think there's plenty of places where space has really important utility. Why were we caught off guard? I think, you know, Jody's right, is that we're creatures of habits, and our habits in this case locate productivity around the idea of time, how much time you're doing something, and where you're doing it. And that's actually a vestige of the industrial age. It just doesn't make sense anymore.
Tom, really curious, and I think so are most of our viewers today, how you're thinking about space as a person who is in the business of leasing space.
Well, obviously, I've become a chicken farmer, so there's a big shift going on. I mean, I think Jody and Nate are a little more in tune to the effect on people. It's interesting, the last 5-6 years, maybe even 7 years, we've seen such a dramatic shift in office space to collaboration. Collaboration, I want collaborative space. I want collaborative space. Well, I have, you know, paperwork next to me here that speaks volumes about how we need to basically now isolate. And how do we isolate and collaborate? So it's going to, and we'll go ahead and get into that later, knowing the questions ahead of time, but that's the shift. We were not prepared because we've been building offices for the last 7+ years around collaboration, and tightening space and putting people closer together, which is obviously going to be a problem going to the future.
Yeah, if I can pick up on what Tom just said too, it's I think that's actually, there's two challenges right now. And again, you know, Jody speaks to this. It's like we're all home right now, and a lot of us love it and some of us hate it, but we're not in a place of choice. That's what Tom was talking about. So that actually weighs on everyone, is that there's no autonomy here. But the platforms that we're on right now, they're really not built for what Tom just talked about, for collaboration. In fact, the four of us were just talking about this before this seminar started, about where are the limitations right now. I've been saying that, you know, as great as Zoom is, it's the Model T era right now. But I do believe that we will, you know, start promoting more and more technology that allows us that richer experience that we seek.
Well, and I also want to add into what Tom said, because I think what's really interesting is we're still going to need space. And we're still going to come together in spaces. But what's going to be interesting about how we think about collaboration is this. So I have a client in Canada who moved into the results-only work environment. So we've been guiding them for the last 3 years. And at the same time, they were changing their space to see what that would look like in the sort of the future world with a new mindset. And they were going to set up collaboration spaces. And Tom knows about this. We've been doing this for the last decade and showing people how to collaborate. But when you set up a collaboration space with a 20th century mindset, you're actually telling people how to collaborate. This is what it looks like to collaborate. We all sit in a circle, we have a table in the middle of us, or whatever that is. And they realized that they couldn't set the space up that way anymore because it was directing people how to do something instead of letting people naturally collaborate, whatever that means.
I agree with that. I mean, this is a black box theater. This place is built to be moved around by the people who are in it, not, you know, directed, as Jody was saying.
Right.
Well, maybe this is a good time. I think space is a big question and a big curiosity. So Tom, maybe let's talk a little bit about what the trends had been in commercial real estate. We were talking yesterday about sizes of cubicles and how some of that has changed. And what are you at Colliers and your colleagues, what are you thinking now?
Well, so what we spoke about quickly yesterday, you know, office buildings were built, for instance, in the 80s for 250 square foot per person. And in the last 7-10 years, we've shrunk down to, in some dramatic cases, 135 square foot per person. That's an extreme, but around about 150 to 175 square foot per person. And to include, of course, common space in the office, workspace, conference rooms, break areas, and so forth. And that's going to be, I mean, are we going to go back to the 250 per person? Is it going to be an expansion of space, right? Some contrarians are going to say, well, no, we're going to still use the office, but we're just going to have to get more office space. Obviously, the news isn't leading that way. You know, Jody, to your point about the companies in Canada, there's the Open Text in Canada just announced they're shutting down 50% of their offices around the globe. They have 40 offices in the United States, and they are closing 50%. Nationwide Insurance is closing 5 offices, which will affect 640,000 square feet. I mean, it's a frontier, a wild frontier. And, so I don't know. Listen, I wish I had a crystal ball. Space won't go away. Offices won't go away. We will have, centralized hubs. We will have points of contact. I think the dramatic shift is going to be things like alternate work days. You work 2 days from the office, you work 2 days from the office, and then you have, our furniture vendors they're usually pretty quick to market with new opportunities and new ideas. I think they'll collaborate real well with office users around safety and security and people's health and safety around office furniture. I mean, it's a wild frontier right now. So to give you a hard-nosed, hey, this is what's going to happen, that'd be
crazy.
Are there any clients though already that are looking at, I don't know, installing plexiglass dividers or already kind of dividing up the space in new ways?
So as we were talking yesterday, as Nate said earlier, our group's title is Tenant Advisory Group, and we've been advisors on the phone quite a bit in Zoom and Microsoft Teams and WebEx. We're playing the advisor role more than ever around how can we rethink the office today without putting a lot of capital into it and a quick reaction. So when we do open back up, and a lot of that is around traffic patterns and kind of telling our leaders to, take it easy, calm down. Let's not react too quickly, but let's try to do the best we can to create safe environments.
Well, I'd like to pick up on that because
sorry, Wayne.
Allie, your question is really about like what trends were happening before, and then what, with COVID, how does that impact things? So there's a couple things behind that. Like, if you look at Gen Z, people were born between 95 and 2008, and they're just entering the workplace right now. Half of them have side gigs. So the idea of like where you're productive and how you're productive is very diverse. I mean, we have, as you alluded to, we've got members that are in healthcare. We've got members that are in restaurants. We've got members that, are in law firms and whatnot. So space becomes a very particularized conversation. The other thing too is, the world is very unpredictable right now. And rather than starting to think about, well, how is it going to be life, how is life going to be post-COVID? Right now, we're counseling people as to, there's going to be a long interim period of accommodating this virus in our environment. So don't plan too far out. In fact, when things become unpredictable, start shortening the time horizon of your predictions. And then something that we were talking about yesterday too is that there's physical safety concerns that we have to talk about, but there's also psychological safety. So if you're home and you've got a vulnerable adult at home or something like that, your psychological state is different than if you're 30 and you live alone. So employers have to accommodate all of it.
We spoke about yesterday too. I mean, what we see, obviously I'm in the space business, right? I'm in the office space business, but this is really needs to be impressed upon our leaders around how do you react and how do you create a safe environment for your employees? And that's I think, showing itself now more than ever. Because like you said, and like we said yesterday, you're gonna have someone who doesn't think this is gonna be that big of a problem and I'm gonna go back to the office and when's happy hour? And then you're gonna have that person right next to them who has the vulnerable adult living with them, or they are, or their kid is. And so it really is a time for leaders to step up and have that resolve, and then hybrid your office, make it what it's going to be, a little bit of both. And
Yep. I want to add into that. What's important about that too, I think, is that what we forget is that people don't have a choice. So we're trying to set everything up so that managers can still manage people and not work, and tell them where to work from. And I think that's the problem. People in the chat are saying, well, how do we create a hybrid? Well, you create a hybrid by creating a culture of autonomy where people can determine where they work most effectively every day, and balance that out with accountability. Everybody knowing exactly what they need to do and what those measurable results are. If we continue to manage people, we're going to keep getting what we're getting, and that's frustration. You know, people talk about all the interruptions at home today, but let's not forget how many interruptions we get all day in the office, right? Interrupt, and then you're all stressed out and overworked, and you go home and you have to do your work at night and on the weekends. Well, now we're seeing the opposite of that. Right now we're in our houses, interrupt. So we have to figure out how to navigate work in more fits and starts and not think of it as a shift, 8 to 5. We can actually work at different times. If we focus on the work, then we can start personally balancing that out for ourselves and determining where is the best place to work.
Maybe we each need a tree house alone where we can just focus at our best time. But Jody, this is exactly what you do and what you were working on with leaders even before COVID. Talk just a little bit about how you get that change in mindset. Obviously, a lot of CEOs out there have no choice right now, but how do you really shift an office or a company's culture to being results oriented and not place oriented?
Well, it's not easy, and we really have to change it to results only. So that's people's mindset shifting to thinking only about the work and not making judgments about where people are working from. That's the big first step. We have to understand the craziness of the institution we're in. Then we have to break that toxic language. Gee, I wish I were like Nate and I could work from home on Tuesdays. We have to take that language out. It's not work from home. It's not telework. It's not remote work. It's just work.
Yeah.
And so that's an important thing to pull out, but it's hard for people to do that because it's in our DNA. The time clock is in our DNA. And I think Nate was saying before, it's that time plus presence equals results somehow. We remove that from the equation and it's about results in the middle. And then all the tales of HR have to play around that to understand how we are the most productive and efficient and effective. It's not easy, but the upside is enormous in terms of productivity and employee health and well-being, reduced stress, all of those things that we measure today.
Right. Yeah. Nate, more thoughts on that and thoughts on collaboration in this kind of weird space that we're in right now?
Well, I will say this, as we touch base with so many different types of people, I'll tell you the folks that I have the most sympathy for right now are people who have young school-age kids at home. They are working, they're babysitting, and they're teaching all of a sudden. And they seem to be the folks that are the most stressed out right now. So in some cases, those are the folks who probably want to come back to the sanctuary of a workplace. But now with daycare concerns and stuff like that, it goes back to what Jody was saying about this lack of autonomy. I'm not in a place of choice. I will kind of add to what Jody was saying though, and we've touched upon is this whole idea of flexibility, because things are going to be unpredictable for a while right now. So you may have plans and put in plans to go back to the workplace and stagger your workforce and all that kind of stuff. But we can also not be surprised by the fact that we may see waves of pandemics come at us for the next couple of years. So whatever you're investing in, I would suggest, or at least we're counseling people, to be flexible and variable. Be able to pull back your space needs if something, in the environment is happening. So at the end of the day, I guess in great agreement with Jody, at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is how can people be most productive and purposeful in their work, and where you do that and when you do that, or even how you do that and who you do it with. That depends on so many variables right now.
Yeah, and we have to stop talking about re-entry. We don't want to re-enter, because that's regression. Now we have this rare opportunity from a leadership perspective to really move culture forward into a contemporary mindset. This is our chance. This is the opportunity.
I agree with that.
This is one of those impetuses of change that's going to be forever, right? When 9/11 happened, it changed how we went to the airport, and now that's our normal. My kids have no idea that there was anything before that, right? When they went to the TSA, it was always slow and invasive, right? I mean, it's so we're going down that road again. It's not. I totally agree with you, Jody. This is not a return to normalcy, and that's. By the way, that was my American history major at work right there. Return to normalcy. Woodrow Wilson. I finally knew it would come into play right there.
There you have it. Tom, I'd like to pick up on what you said because it's really important. This is 9/11 times 100. We woke up on September 12th with a whole new consideration set that had been introduced into our world, and we started building into that new consideration set. We started to re-regulate our world, but regulation isn't just a matter of government putting laws and rules in place. It's also how we regulate ourselves culturally. So our attitudes changed and our practices changed around safety. The same thing now is happening with hygienic considerations. We woke up, that's a whole new layer, it's additive. It's not getting rid of everything that happened before. We have a whole new consideration set, new needs. There'll be lots of opportunities to build into that. And I can't predict much, but I will predict this. This won't be the last time that we see a globally shaking kind of occurrence happen that really, upsets the firmament. It could be something in AI doing something really wild, or that we wake up one morning and the whole world is broke on paper because of a cyber crime. We should expect that there are going to be massive disruptions in our world, and we've got to learn how to pivot. Back to Jody, don't be anchored to a certain kind of mindset. We've got to learn how to actually ingest that as a daily practice of how are you going to pivot and be productive regardless of what's going on.
It's a new DNA, and it's like disaster proofing the workforce.
Yeah.
It's for all the time, not just during these big disruptions that you're talking about, Nate. Totally agree.
I love it. I think for a lot of companies, maybe this was the push, unfortunately, that they needed to do that. I am curious, though, from all of you, from companies you're talking to, from leaders what's actually working right now? What are things that are working well, or good trends that you're seeing coming out of this enormous shift?
Well, I've had a couple of, if you guys know, I've had a couple of clients, tenants, get into some pretty deep discussion about what are the successes, what's the silver lining. They're actually finding that, it's the difference of going to work, the term of, I love to go to work. Well, it needs to change to, I love the work I do, because going to work could be your base, your bedroom, whatever. But the shift that they're seeing, the silver lining is work-life balance it's got a whole new meaning. And, people are being productive at odd hours. And we were talking yesterday, back in the late 90s, the Gen Xers were coming into the workplace, and we were at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you want to go for a run. That wasn't a big deal. And it was a thing, we work when we want to work. And that really shouldn't have shifted all that much. Now we just have more responsibility, I guess. But that's what we're seeing, is that the leaders that I've talked to, they're seeing, we have these like exercises in optimism. And Jody, your cat's behind you. And
yep, I'm human.
Those exercises in optimism are work-life balance is great. It's not rushed to the office. You're using actually more time in your workspace is productive because you're focused. I'm here to work. But Nate, you said something yesterday that really stuck with me. And that was, when's the last time you met someone new?
Yeah.
Right? Not meeting a lot of new people right now. And for the extroverts and the salespeople and the marketing and collaboration people, this is a challenge. And so a lot of our leaders are really questioning of how do you satiate that need. But work-life balance, I think, is actually a real silver lining.
I think I agree with that. And I think before COVID-19, it was easier for people to compartmentalize things. I have my work time, and then I have my time away from work. And now it feels like that's more blending together, which is what we've tried to do for a long time, but we're unable to do it because of flexible work practices. With flexibility, managers have more control over people's time than people having more control over their time, because it's a permission-based system. And what I like, what's happening right now is that people are realizing, I don't have to fill my time. Like, I don't have to go somewhere and fill it up and then try to catch up with everything else later. I can figure out a personal way to adjust to that all the time. And that's what I love about this. I like to say, again, it's not flexibility, it's autonomy. It's me driving my work, me owning my work, not the work owning me.
Yeah, Allie, I would take, building on what's been said, and taking advantage of the fact that, like, for instance, Jody just had her cat go behind her. So here's some things that we're seeing that will work, that are really working right now. And some of this is regardless of what sector you're in. What's really working is that we're actually in each other's homes right now. It's a great opportunity to know the human, not the job title, but the human that you get to work with. That is working for everyone. As we bring more humanity into what it means to be productive, it's expanding a lot of possibility because our talents are usually bigger than our job descriptions and our resumes. So that's one thing that's working. As I said earlier, shortening time horizons of what you're willing to predict and plan for is working for everyone right now. At first it was day by day, then week by week, month by month. Right now I'm seeing people who are like planning out to the end of the year, but really no further than that. Here's a big one. Companies that can articulate their purpose, individuals who can articulate their purpose, that's working because why you are working, why you are trying to be productive needs to be consistent. How you're going to do it is going to be very different. So knowing the difference between your why and your how is an absolutely critical understanding right now if you want to thrive.
And that sounds like outcome-based thinking versus activity-based planning.
For sure.
It's backwards. It's doing a lot of work and being busy and talking about how busy you are and all of that is like, go on. We really have to tie to the purpose.
And it's funny. People say, "Oh, you call people in my business pretty quiet," and when you hear someone say, "Oh, I'm so busy," really, hard. It's. I saw a couple of questions come up on the chat around creating the water cooler talk and some other various ways of saying the same question. And it's funny. Right when this began, everyone was Zoom happy hours. How many times did you do a Zoom happy hour? 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And that's kind of now started to wane a little bit. And I think one of the ways companies can adapt to that, even once we start getting back to an office space and some more movement, is, we have chief culture officers in our office. There's a few of them, and they come from different departments within the company. And they're responsible of creating that what is, let's have a happy hour to talk about what Netflix binge you're on. And, let's have a happy hour to talk about what kind of chickens are you raising and those kind of things. I think it's really important for companies to look beyond and say, okay, let's get outside the office and create that social element in the office.
Yep. And Tom, I would say that don't wait for a happy hour. You can easily build those elements into any meeting. We were just talking about it, as we got together this morning, is that one of our practices that we not only do at Studio E, but we actually counsel everyone into doing, is starting the meeting with conversations that really aren't about business. We go around and we learn about what's happening in each other's lives, that water cooler kind of conversation. We refer to it as rose and thorn and bud. What's going great in your world? What are some challenges? And what are you looking forward to? And if you are intentional about that, again, you kind of create that humanity in the workforce. And then you can start tossing the ball with each other with a lot more speed and agility because I know who I'm playing with. I know what they're capable of, and I know what their day looks like today. So back to Jody's point, I can be much more confident about the outcome if I actually know the person that I'm working with as opposed to the title.
Here's a great question that came in from Marcelo, actually aimed at Jody, but I'm sure you'll all have thoughts on this. As we're talking about really shifting the mindset of how we work and how we work how we function as work groups, what is the role of the leaders? What do the leaders need to be thinking about and doing right now?
I love that question. That's a great question. I think what leaders need to be thinking about right now is how they begin to manage the actual work that people are doing. Help bring clarity to that work so that people understand, what is it that I'm being paid to do? I'm not being paid to give you my time. I'm actually being paid to produce a result. And what does that look like? We like to say managers need to become results coaches. Instead of managing me, you help me drive the work forward. And I think Nate was talking about that as well. We're all adults. We all have busy lives and things to do. And if we can just be clear with each other, we can move the work along in a better way, in a more efficient way. One example of that I like to tell people is one of the vernaculars in the workplace is ASAP. I'll get you that ASAP. Can you get me that ASAP? Well, what does that mean? 5 minutes, an hour, 2 days, a week. And that causes just that one thing to change. Tell somebody what you need and when you need it. Changes everything. Because now I know how to plan my day, plan my work, plan my life, because everybody's clear. So leaders today can start looking towards a future of autonomy and accountability where people know what they're doing and they're free to make choices about where to be when they need to be there.
I don't disagree with that, Jody. I'm going to add something to it, though, is that, and I think this is one of those things that were trends before this all happened, is that a leader has to be dually literate. A leader needs to know how to manage the business, which is really about using predictive logic and predicting the next quarter and managing process and all that kind of stuff. They have to lead that. That's almost table stakes, right? But there's so much unknown right now that a leader actually has to be kind of like the chief learning officer as well, and not like in a training sense. There are points where you can say, hey, I've been here, I know what we're doing, let's not reinvent the wheel, let's look for great results, we all know what to do. Then there's a huge array of environment out there where none of us have ever seen any of this, right? And at that point, a leader needs to step away from hierarchy. A leader needs to flatten the entire team into a learning party. And no one is smarter than anyone else in that. It really is about harnessing your curiosity, unleashing your talent, not just managing your talent. So these days, and as I said, I think these days are staying with us. A great leader is someone who can manage an organization and unleash the human organism, if you will, of what a business or any other enterprise looks like.
It sounds like moving away from command and control and moving into a more opportunistic way of thinking and working together.
Here's what I would say, Jody, is that I think that there are elements where you actually do need command and control, and then there are elements where you need to unleash. But in agreement with you, where it is command and control, there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, you and I are great fans of Dan Pink, for instance.
Yes.
There's great opportunity to pay your people with autonomy, allowing them to master things that they're great at, and giving them work that is personally purposeful. There's wonderful ways that you can manage talent that way without, anchoring them to time and place. But in addition to where you actually are running an organization from command and control, in addition to that, you also have to understand that adding value is actually a construct of two things. You have to be responsive to your customers' needs, but you also have to be relevant to their needs. Right now, relevance is being shaken up. You have to be curious and explore what that looks like, and the whole team should be unleashed to do that.
Yeah, I think everybody should be able to do that.
A lot of strong verbs there. We're unleashing and commanding. Tom, we're getting a lot of questions from people about shared workspaces. Been such a big trend. And again, back to that collaboration theme. What is the future of co-working, of shared spaces, of collaborative setups?
That's, all indications point to this could be the nail in the coffin for co-working spaces. There's certain co-working facilities that are set up for success because they're a little bit more individualized. They have specific space. You're renting an actual space inside the space, and there's a door, and those places are probably set up for a little bit more long-term success in what looks like the now environment. But the big open co-working floor, that's going to be a real challenge because those models are built around packing people in. And they're built around, I want to be near somebody. I'm a freelance writer, but I want to sit near someone and have someone next to me and feel that energy. Right. That's going to be, I don't feel confident around, probably making some enemies right now, but I don't feel very confident around that space.
Tom, I agree with you on that. I think you're right. The way those spaces were built, I think they're actually underutilized right now. They did want to pack them in, right? They had big open spaces and they wanted to set it up so a lot of people could get together. I don't know if it's actually panned out that way. I think if we continue on with the same mindset about work, those spaces and communities are going to remain underutilized. I think if people have more choice and we can get be safe and all of those things that we need to do. I think those could be more utilized when people can stay in their communities and want a different place to work, a different environment to work in.
So what you're saying, Jody, is you're saying the smaller co-working facilities that are in neighborhoods, or not concentrated to the CBD or to downtown Minneapolis, those ones will have a little bit more opportunity because I want to leave the house and I want to go to somewhere. Yeah, but again, it's how it's set up, because if it's built into the masses, I wouldn't. Would you go to a room? There's going to be 200 people standing in there right now, and how long is it going to take you to get away from that thought?
Yeah, but that's the point, though, is that right now the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
But we can't answer what will that look like if, for instance, we have a widely adopted vaccine, right? So that goes back to not trying to like predict out what is 3 years from now going to look like, is to actually like what we're talking about right now, that people will feel safe. So that safeness thing, and it's easier to make things physically safe when there are less people around. People will probably feel safer in localized environments, but we won't go back, we'll go into a new normal right now. But right now it's going to be business as unusual. Using us as an example right now, because we were, we were in a restaurant business, right? We were a live events business. Right now, we're planning on being a virtual business, and we're going to be sprinkling in live, face-to-face events, more like spice. It used to be the main dish, but that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So
I can't tell you what we're going to do in a year.
Right. But the challenge is, let's say it takes 2 to 3 years to get to that comfortable practice. From a business perspective, those facilities are built, they can't sustain that. They're not going to survive that long without those kind of numbers. I mean, they're built on growing their membership year over year over year. Well, you just went from here down to here, and now you're starting over again. That's going to be a real hit.
I think it would help.
That, though, is that is predicated on today's business model. We were talking about this with you yesterday, Tommy, that you're diversifying. You're a chicken farmer right now. No, actually what we were talking about is that you are in the advisory business as well as in the space business. And it just may be that your advisory business becomes a more prominent part of your economic model. So that's one thing I would encourage businesses to look at as well. In addition to what Jody's saying, don't be locked into the old construct of how it is to be productive. Don't be locked into your old construct of what your business model is. That's actually been a challenge for a while now, is that people turn their business model into their customer. Stop doing that. Be really flexible about how you're going to be productive, including where's the opportunity to actually provide value.
Another question along the space lines, someone asking about the near office concept. Is that a term that you use, Tommy? The idea of companies leasing spaces near their workers, not thinking so much about like a big headquarters, but just.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, it's satellite offices is the term near. I'll start using it now. And I'll make it my own and look smart tomorrow. But no, the satellite office model, actually, we're working with a client that Nate and I actually share a client that they're talking about that. Where can we spot in around the Twin Cities and have smaller spaces with easier access, quicker access, and then access to those demographics and those customers in the area. So absolutely, it's part of the lexicon right now. We don't call it, I would just say satellite officing, and then diminishing the size of the hub to complement that, right? So if you have a 40,000 square foot main office and you're going to diminish that down to 20,000 feet and then spread 2,000 square foot offices around the loop of the metro, that's a great model.
Yeah, and you may not even need that much space. However, I think what people like, and I saw it a little bit in the comments, is if those spaces can be in their communities, just think how we can change that whole idea of the commute. I mean, that could be, a lot of things could happen around there. And I think people sometimes like to go to a place to do work versus stay kind of in their home or be told where to work. They like to get out and move about. And so offices like that, or spaces like that closer to the community, I think would be really hot in the future.
Well, I think isn't that one of the things that a lot of us are struggling with? It's that we used to have that clear distinction. You went to work, yes, there were distractions, but at least you knew you were doing work and then you could put the work away to go home. Now, yes, we're having all this great family time, but it's all kind of mashed together, which can be stressful in and of itself. How do you work through that?
Well, I'll tell you, again, I love what you're leaning into there, Allie. This whole idea of, I'll call it false distinctions, that felt very real. But it really is about your mindset. So I will tell you that, work-life balance has always been a challenge for professionals. And one of the things that I've always been counseling folks around is look for work-life integration. Have the curiosity to talk about what you're working on with your teenage kids. Get their opinion, get them thinking about things. I think we put these false demarcations. We actually label ourselves like, now I'm a title, now I'm a person, now I'm a political label or whatever. The more we can synthesize and harmonize all of that in our life, I think the fuller our lives become.
I agree. And we cannot integrate work and life as long as the organization controls our time. Autonomy is very important to that scenario, and I totally agree with you, but in order for us to just have life, just like it's just work, we have our life, and it can just be what it is if we have autonomy to do that, and we really truly understand what our measurable results are that we need to deliver to the organization. Both of those things in place.
And maybe, Jody, it's almost like the Stockholm syndrome, right? Is that in addition for management to give you autonomy, what I'm hearing from Allie, or the way I want to answer that, is that we also have to give ourselves autonomy. That the more we allow ourselves the freedom to think about our purpose as an individual, and that work is part of that purpose. It isn't the purpose in and of itself. The more that we think of ourselves as multidimensional, the more possibility that we have in our lives, and the more possibility we have to create value as well.
Yeah, we have to create work cultures around that. And we have to stop thinking of it, like we said before, as work is a place I go. Work is something I do.
Yeah, I love how Tommy said it.
Yeah.
So
I love what I get to do to work.
There have been a lot of articles and kind of the common wisdom is, you should turn off the email at a certain hour, or now the Slack channel and all that. Don't be sending your employees emails at midnight that make them think they're supposed to be online 24/7. Is that out the window now? Do you do it whenever it works for you?
That flexibility showed up for sure.
Yes, you do it when you want. That's called technical change. It's we take the same construct and we tell people how they should do it because we're trying to take care of them. We can take care of ourselves.
Well,
we
and
can take care of ourselves.
In this environment, the excuse pool has grown considerably too. I have to take care of my kids. I'll do this later. I have to, I'm online schooling my children, and I'm taking care of something that has to happen around my house.
So let me take that from the flip side, though, is that maybe I have an idea at 11 o'clock at night and I do want to get it out to the point that we're all making here. Then it's my responsibility, actually. It's my opportunity to communicate that to who I'm sending that email to, right? That I don't expect you to get to this right now. It's just on my mind. When you can get to it, I'd appreciate a response from this. So again, I'll call it shifting the power dynamic. And then I would also say, this goes to productivity, but it actually kind of goes, I'll call it to mental health. Right now, I would suggest that everybody watch their digital diet. And what I mean by that is like, don't hang on the news every ounce of the day, right? It's a horror story out there. Same thing with work, take a break from work per se, and clear your mind so you can come back and be more productive with it. Step away from the screen now and then. And I've been a horrible offender of that for the last 7 weeks myself, but be really intentional about what you're doing and is it actually working for you right now?
Right. Here's an interesting question, totally different, but I love the idea of putting your business minds to education for a minute. Miriam asks, what advice do you have for those of us who work in institutions organized around the Industrial Revolution, such as education? How do we get kids ready to engage in this new way?
Okay, so
Miriam,
I think
thank
really
you for that question.
Yeah, it's a great, I saw it come up earlier too. That's a great, and I actually made a note to educators. one of my clients is a charter school, and we had a discussion last week, and their shift has been really hard on them. And then for those of us who have kids, my kids are fully admitting finally that they like going to school. They want to go to class. So they're looking forward to that old model. And I hope it comes back. I'm going to stop talking, but I really would love to know what that future looks like too, because it's got to be really hard on that industry.
But
Nate, what do you think?
I just think that's a perfect example of where the business model has become the customer. Our schools are built on an industrial model that operate on a calendar is from the agricultural model. You can't start school before Labor Day because apparently our kids are harvesting in the field. So we have just become passengers to a model that schedules first and foremost around when can the buses run. So we're all captives to all these things that have nothing to do with our kids actually learning. Are they engaged? So we have to, I think it's just, I'll call it a caricature of a larger issue out there. And it's a great question, Miriam, because it should not exist on that. Learning should be, first of all, lifelong, and it should be deeply engaging, because if it's not engaging, the learning won't imprint in you, and you won't use the learning going forward. We have to, maybe more into like what Jody's talking about, we have to utilize technologies as well as just different designs to address a question that we love asking at the studio, which is not how smart are you, but rather how are you smart? Because that's a different question. We actually standardize our thinking in our kids because we have to answer the same question the same way. We go into standardized tests, and then we go into a world of predictive logic. The world doesn't look like that anymore. We need to break the model.
It's interesting when you were talking, Nate, you could have inserted the word the workplace everywhere you said education.
Yeah,
it's like we set up the industrial way of going to school, and then the only time we have autonomy and accountability is college. That's it. We're free to make the mistakes we would make, stay in bed and not go to class, whatever that is. But we know what the outcome is. We don't get the grade, we don't get to graduate. And then what do? We go right back into school.
Yep.
We go right back into a workplace that's from the industrial mindset. So both ends have to change. Absolutely.
So let me, we don't have to mention the gentleman's name or the outfit, but Tommy alluded to someone that we work with. And I adore this guy. And I don't think he would argue with this. He is a fairly traditional thinker. This is one of the great opportunities that we sit on right now. This is a gentleman who was not comfortable with satellite offices and certainly not comfortable with working at home. But the reality has changed, and now he's actually seeing the proof points of, wow, people really are productive. So now he has an expanded sense of possibility of how to operate his firm. One of the things that we heard frequently in the medical community is that the consumer will never use televisits. We have to bring them into a clinic. We have to make them wait for 2 hours while we're backed up and all that kind of stuff. And our healthcare clients are seeing televisits go through the roof. Not only is that showing that the doctors can perform a lot of things this way, that we as patients can also be good patients this way. Again, bringing that back to school. If other industries can do this, so should our schools.
Right, and guess what? The whole thing about flexibility and the whole business case around it has been around since the 70s. Mm-hmm. It's been there since the 70s. It's been proven out over and over and over and over again that people are more productive when they're outside the office. Yet what have we been doing for the last 40 years? Figuring out a way to keep them in the office. Let's build a compound and have a dry cleaner and a fitness center and a daycare and all this stuff so we can say, look at how great it is to continue to come in and continue to come in, even though the business case says that's not the most productive way to work.
Yeah. So Jody, there's a little off topic, sorry, but there's a piece that is being drafted right now called, to your point about building amenities around offices and centers and so forth, we call that the third workspace, right? Where the community space in any building is a third workspace. Well, the Zoom, the Telex, the Microsoft Teams is becoming the third or fourth, whatever, another workspace for us to play in. So it's interesting that you say that. What we were in a continuing ed earlier today that talked about when does that community space come back to life? It's going to be a while for that to come back to life. And what's the cleaning procedures? What's the safety procedures? And that is also built around density. So it's this has become the other workspace for us.
I think
Agree.
we'll sprinkle it back in. And as I said, there may be times when we have to ratchet that back. But one of our models here is that we put people into mastermind groups, right? That 4 members will be in this really intimate relationship. Right now they're doing it through Zoom or whatnot, but it's always better to be in one another's company when you're talking about real life, not just work, right? And we're going to start using our clubhouse for that. Are we going to put 30 people in here for a workshop? Probably not anytime soon, but we are going to respond to the relevance and the need for some people who want to be in a face-to-face moment with each other and enjoy all that beautiful information that we get when we're actually in each other's presence.
I agree with you on that, Nate. And I think I said this to you yesterday. I think what's been really interesting for me is that I've had more face-to-face meetings in the last 6 weeks than I've had in the last 10 years.
Funny.
Because of Zoom.
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like I'm face-to-face, but I hear what you're saying. Sometimes that physical, proximity when you're doing things together, we're still going to do that. We're going to come back to that. But we can also flip our mindset and shift it a little bit to say that even this can be intimate. Even
it comes full circle to the beginning of our conversation, right. Which is, I have some meetings like this that are, I'm getting more out of people, and they're not sitting in their offices and looking at you and then looking at their phone real quick and checking their watch. You're
right.
And you're on check.
Right.
Yeah. But all due respect to Zoom happy hours, Tom, it's better when we clink glasses.
So are there any other, there are a lot of questions, a lot in the chat box just about, I think the thing that people are really missing besides those, clinking glasses is just that the water cooler chatter, the things that happen in the office that are unstructured, the chance meetings or, kind of happening to discuss things. Everything is so programmed right now and so scheduled. Any other techniques or suggestions that any of you have while we're limited to Zooms and FaceTime?
Create unstructured time within the structure. That's what I'm saying is if you have a standing team meeting at noon, we do, right? The first part of that is a check-in. There's no agenda there other than how's everybody doing? What's going on?
I like to call them social buffers. Every meeting should start with a social buffer. What's going on? What's the story? And even if I think this is up to the leaders, even if that starts to go down, take a tangent and go down some rabbit hole of fun conversation, let it go, let it happen, and have that flexibility, because that mental health element, right? There's a lot of people who they go to work, that's their social life. And they're not introverts, extroverts, just take that label away. It's their social life, and you've taken that away. And, or it's just been challenged right now.
I would add this to it too, is that it's a great opportunity to promote possibility. I can't tell you how many times we've worked with teams in other businesses where we've set up this practice of check-ins before you get to the meat of the meeting. And it's within that check-in that something really interesting happens, an idea comes out, or a team member's need comes out and someone has a solve for it. That it isn't just a buffer, and I don't disagree with you, Tommy. I think that using it as a buffer is really effective, but it can also be an incredibly productive time. The issue is it structured? Is it like on point to the task at hand, or are you creating space for possibility? And by creating space for us as first names first, we will actually usually emerge more possibility, which is more opportunity down the road.
We have just a couple minutes left. Here's a big thought question from one of our listeners today. Jody, primarily directed at you, but I'd love for everyone to weigh in, talking about ROW, about your system. How do leaders preach the idea to employees of strictly focusing on results only without losing touch with purpose, the purpose that transcends, the weekly, monthly, kind of have to do's? How do you do both?
So that's a great question. The thing about the results-only work environment is everybody in the organization is tied to the purpose or mission or outcome. And everything that they do is driving towards that.
Absolutely.
It's not an activities-based culture. It's an outcome-based culture. And when people know what they're driving towards, they actually bond together better. I'll give you an example. So you go to a team building event, right? And you're there and you have blindfolds on and you have all these ropes and everybody knows exactly what they're going to do. And they know what the goal is, and the manager doesn't manage it. Everybody does it together, right? But they're really clear. And then they get back in the workplace. They don't know really they're not connected to the mission. It's all about putting in time. They're miserable because they can't go to their child's play. All that other stuff comes in. So it's not easy, I have to say to your listeners, to shift the mindset and the DNA of an entire culture, but it is possible. We've been doing it with hundreds of teams all over the globe, and they're successful at it. They don't talk about work from home. They're nimble and quick. They don't label people. They don't judge people, and they're focused on one thing, and that's working together to get it done.
Yep.
Sounds amazing.
Jody, you've spoken a lot of wisdom there. It really, it begins and ends with purpose. What your objective is should be pushing your purpose into the world to create productive paths out of your purpose. I will say, like Jody, you know, we've spent a lot of time with organizations in literally every sector. That I would say it's not that it's hard. It needs to be intentional. You need to be intentional about articulating your purpose, and you need to create a purpose that is memorable and actionable, meaning that it should be like a sentence. People won't remember a paragraph. Jody and I should have the same sentence come out of our mouths, because if we can do that, then we'll know what to do about that. And she and I will work with utter trust with one another that we have overlapped our purposes together.
Correct.
Very good. Tommy, any quick final thoughts?
I mean, I can't add on that. Those are great. That was great. No, I can't add any value at that point. That would be.
Well, I hope everybody takes a chance to read through the chat. Some really good ideas and conversation happening there too. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Tom, Jody, Nate, you've been really amazing. For anybody that you want to share this with, we're going to have a recording that we'll make available. We'll send it out by email to those who registered. We'll put it on our website as well. Take a minute to go to TCB Mag, sign up for our newsletters if you can. New one coming out this Sunday that I think you're all going to enjoy. Let's just keep getting together and inspiring and working at this new normal. Thank you all. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Jody. Thanks, Tommy. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.